Quranic Laws, Qurani Qawaneen. By G.A. Parwez. Translated by Dr. Abdul Wadud. Injunctions. General injunctions for family life. The injunctions for family life are given in more details than any other subject in the Holy Quran. In the social life of man, home is of utmost gravity. What is it that we call society? The doors of different homes open daily, and the individual dwellers get dispersed in different directions. That is what makes a society. In the evening, the same people return to their respective homes. These very homes keep developing the future community. The upbringing of children depends upon their internal atmosphere. The fate of the future of nation is thus directly connected with the way children are brought up. The concept of Nizam-e-Rabubiyyat, the economic system laid down in the Quran, is based on the principle that every earning member of the society shall work according to his capacity, and all that is gained by their collective efforts shall be spent in fulfilling the needs of all the individuals of the society. In a miniature form, this system takes shape within the four walls of a home. The earning member of the family does not keep to himself what he earns, nor does he give priority to his own needs over the needs of the other members of the family. His earnings are spent by all the members of the family. In so doing, the earner does not bestow a favor upon the recipient, nor does the recipient receives it as charity. The donor considers it to be his responsibility, and the recipient considers it to be his right. Based on the principle of the division of labor, all keep themselves busy in the performance of their respective duties. From this arises the feeling of mutual cooperation, and thus a pleasant atmosphere prevails. The result of this delightful prevalence produces the occurrence of deep relationship of love and attraction which lasts for the rest of their lives. Thus, a good home presents an example for the good society. That is why the Holy Quran has accorded such great importance to family life and has provided detailed injunctions to make it exemplary, and this aspect takes precedence in our order of priority too in connection with Quranic injunctions. Injunctions, family life. 1. The status of man and woman. Basically, according to the Holy Quran, there is no difference or distinction between one child and another by virtue of his birth. 1770.
وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ.
We have made every human being equally worthy of respect is the ground rule. It is apparent that both men and women are included in humanity, and both of them are equally worthy of respect. In pre-Islamic Arabia, a girl was considered inferior to a boy, and sadness, depression and anger of spirits prevailed on the birth of a girl. The Holy Quran has forcefully condemned this mentality and has described it as follows, 1658-59.
وَإِذَا بُشِّرَ أَحَدُهُمْ بِالْأُنْثَى ظَلَّ وَجْهُهُ مُسْوَدًّا وَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ يَتَوَارَى مِنَ الْقَوْمِ مِنْ سُوءِ مَا بُشِّرَ بِهِ أَيُمْسِكُهُ عَلَى هُوَنٍ أَمْ يَدُسُّهُ فِي التُّرَابِ أَلَا سَاءَ مَا يَحْكُمُونَ.
When news is brought to one of them of the birth of a female child, his face darkens, and he is filled with inward grief. The birth of a girl is considered such a disgraceful event that he hides himself with shame from the people because of the bad news announced to him. He begins to think whether he should keep her alive with disgrace or bury her in the dust, in order to save himself from this ignominy. Ah! What an evil choice he decides on her. The result of this degraded status of girls in the Arab society of that era was that they were kept devoid of literacy and art. They were considered foolish and ignorant. There was no value of their opinions, and they were considered unworthy of consultation in settling affairs. It is apparent that when they are kept in this position in successive generations, their intellect would gradually degenerate. These were the women whom the Quran describes as 43:18.
أَوَمَنْ يُنَشَّأُ فِي الْحِلْيَةِ وَهُوَ فِي الْخِصَامِ غَيْرُ مُبِينٍ.
One brought up among ornaments and unable to give a clear account in a dispute. This was the abatement in a woman, on the basis of which the Quran had advised that when a woman has to appear before a court of law, a second woman shall stand by her side to remind her if she forgets or is confused. See under the heading Evidence. 282.
أَمْ تَضِلَّ إِحْدَاهُمَا فَتُذَكِّرَ إِحْدَاهُمَا الْأُخْرَى.
If one of them gets confused or forgets, the other may remind her. The Quran raised woman from this level, and with proper education and upbringing brought her to the level of man in all walks of life. Men were instructed not to look down on women because, 3:194.
بَعْضُكُمْ مِنْ بَعْضٍ.
The one of you is from the other. However, in relation to certain natural functions, like childbirth and the nurturing and upbringing of children, there is their own distinct division of labor. From this point of view, in the allocation of labor, men are superior to women in some affairs, and women are superior to men in others. This is what is meant by, for 32:34.
فضل الله به بعضكم على بعض.
Allah has made some of them excel others. In order to fulfill their natural obligations, a woman's major part of life is spent in the giving birth to and in upbringing of children. During this period, she is not capable of earning her own livelihood. Thus, as is stressed by the Quran, in a family life, man is responsible for fulfilling the needs of the woman, 434.
الرجال قوامون على النساء.
Men are the maintainers of women. This has been made clear so that men may not think that women consume their earnings, while sitting at home, with no effort on their part. Thus, taking them as needy, men may consider them despicable and abject. The Quran has explained to man that family life is a mutual affair. In it the duties performed by woman are not within your reach, as such it is your duty to provide for her and the children. This does not mean that the Quran considers woman a disabled person entirely dependent on man. What has been said relates only to distribution of work in family life, otherwise, a woman can also earn her livelihood and be its owner. It is said in Surah An-Nisa, 432.
للرجال نصيب مما اكتسبوا وللنساء نصيب مما اكتسبن.
Men shall have what they earn, and women shall have what they earn. Since in family life the fulfillment of the needs of the wife and children is the responsibility of man, in the inheritance of the property of parents a daughter's share is half that of a son. Details will be found in the chapter of inheritance. Besides the difference described above, the status of men and women is equal in all affairs of daily life, equal to the extent that the Quran has used the word zawj for them. If two parts of a certain object are such that one remains incomplete without the other, each one of these two parts is called zawj, that is, one serves as a means to complement the other. For example, the two wheels of a cart, if one is missing, or is weak, or comparatively smaller, the other shall become useless. That is the relationship between a wife and her husband and their positions in the vehicle of life. As far as belonging to different sexes is concerned, there is no special competency that men possess, and women do not. Observe how the Holy Quran has described their qualities as parallel to one another when it is said, 33:35.
إن المسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات والقانتين والقانتات والصادقين والصادقات والصابرين والصابرات والخاشعين والخاشعات والمتصدقين والمتصدقات والصائمين والصائمات والحافظين فروجهم والحافظات والذاكرين الله كثيرا والذاكرات أعد الله لهم مغفرة وأجرا عظيما.
It is a fact that as men can bow down to the divine laws, so can women. As men can be the believers in truth, so can women. As men are capable of attesting and verifying their belief by their personal acts, so are women. As men possess the capability of not losing heart in the event of trials, so are women. As men can go on submitting to the feelings of their responsibilities, so do women possess this capability. As men are equipped with the quality of self-sacrifice, so are women. As men can keep complete control over themselves, so can women. As men possess the capability of keeping themselves subservient to the divine laws, so do women. As men and women both possess all the above qualities, the fruits of their deeds should also be similar for each other. For the same reason Allah has prepared protection and reward for both. It can thus be seen from the above that there is no aspect of life in which men are competent, but the women are not. The Quran says, 124.
ومن يعمل من الصالحات من ذكر أو أنثى وهو مؤمن فأولئك يدخلون الجنة ولا يظلمون نقيرا.
If having professed Iman, any does deeds of righteousness, constructive and positive, whether male or female, both shall get the life of paradise and not the least injustice will be done in their recompense. At another place the Quran states, 194, 1697.
لا أضيع عمل عامل منكم من ذكر أو أنثى بعضكم من بعض.
Never shall we deprive any of you of the fruits of your efforts, whether male or female. You are the individuals belonging to the same kind, so why should there be any distinction or classification between you? To enjoin what is lawful according to the divine laws and prohibit what is unlawful is the basic duty, function, of an Islamic state, and men and women both can take part in the performance of this duty. 971.
والمؤمنون والمؤمنات بعضهم أولياء بعض يأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر ويقيمون الصلاة ويؤتون الزكاة ويطيعون الله ورسوله أولئك سيرحمهم الله إن الله عزيز حكيم.
The believing men and women are friends and associates, companions, of one another on account of their sharing the motto of life. They enjoin what is just and forbid what is evil, they establish the system of salat and provide means of nourishment to humanity, and obey Allah and His Rasul, the divine order. These are the people who shall benefit from the means of nourishment provided by Allah, and the whole world shall witness the power and wisdom of the divine laws. Thus, a woman cannot be declared ineligible for taking part in state affairs merely on account of her being a woman. It is apparent from the principles laid down in the Quran that any law that discriminates between men and women only on the basis of sex is repugnant to the Quran, except in those matters where the Quran has specifically said so, for example, share an inheritance. Injunctions, family life. 2. Relations between husband and wife. 1. Nikah, marriage contract. Nikah is a mutual contract between a man and a woman. It appears in Surah An-Nisa, 4:21.
وأخذنا منكم ميثاقا غليظا.
Your wives have taken a firm covenant from you. By virtue of this contract, a man and a woman pledge to accept the rights and obligations laid down by the Quran in respect of their being husband and wife in order to lead a life of companionship. 2. Age for Nikah. According to the Holy Quran, the age for Nikah is the age of puberty. The Quran has specifically mentioned, 4:6.
وابتلوا اليتامى حتى إذا بلغوا النكاح.
You should, as their guardians, keep monitoring the orphans till they reach the age of Nikah. However, the Quran has not determined as to what can be the age of puberty besides other factors, as it differs in different climatic conditions. At yet another place it is stated as age of adolescence, 6:153, 1734.
حتى يبلغ أشده.
Until they reach the age of adolescence. What this age is, has been explained by the Quran at another place while pointing towards the different stages of human life. It is said, 40:67.
ثم يخرجكم طفلا ثم لتبلغوا أشدكم ثم لتكونوا شيوخا.
Then he brings you forth as an infant, then lets you reach the age of adolescence, then lets you become old. Keeping the above verses in view, the matter becomes quite clear. In Surah An-Nisa, 4:6, was said that is, till they reach the age of Nikah, adolescence, and in Surah An-Am has been said, 6:153, till they reach the age of adolescence, and in 40:67, this age has been interpreted as an age, 6:153, between childhood and old age, that is the adolescence. It thus becomes evident that according to Quran, the age of Nikah is the age of puberty, adolescence. Thus, the Quran has laid down the age of marriage as the age of puberty both for the boy and the girl. Therefore, the question of marriages of immature people, before they reach adolescence, does not arise. It is up to the Islamic government to determine this age, according to its environmental circumstances. 3. Mutual consent. Just as the age of puberty of both boy and girl is essential for the contract of marriage, likewise their mutual consent is also mandatory. Without it the contract of marriage cannot take place. About men it is said, 4:3.
فانكحوا ما طاب لكم من النساء.
Marry the woman of your liking. About women it is said, 4:19.
لا يحل لكم أن ترثوا النساء كرها.
It is not lawful for you to bring women into your wedlock forcibly, without their consent. Since the nikah cannot be solemnized in childhood, the question of appointing a guardian does not arise. However, if the woman so desires, she can appoint an attorney in order to settle affairs on her behalf. The statement in Surah Baqarah, 2:237.
بيده عقدة النكاح.
In whose hands is the marriage tie, means the attorney appointed by the woman, or the court itself having the power of dissolution of marriage. 4. Ceremony for nikah, marriage. The Quran has not laid down any specific ceremony for marriage. There is not even a mention of any special person who solemnizes nikah. Since this is a contract, whatever laws are laid down by the government for the ratification of contracts, this contract should also be ratified, confirmed, according to the prevalent laws. It is essential for the government to make definite laws for the purpose. Moreover, it is equally important to proclaim the solemnization of nikah. A marriage kept secret is not tenderized by the Quran. 5. 5. Forbidden for marriage, Muharramat. The Holy Quran has declared in detail those men and women who cannot marry each other. The list is as follows. A. Marriage between a Muslim man or woman, monotheists, and polytheist man or woman is unlawful. It is said, 221.
ولا تنكحوا المشركات حتى يؤمن ولأمة مؤمنة خير من مشركة ولو أعجبتكم ولا تنكحوا المشركين حتى يؤمنوا ولعبد مؤمن خير من مشرك ولو أعجبكم أولئك يدعون إلى النار والله يدعو إلى الجنة والمغفرة بإذنه ويبين آياته للناس لعلهم يتذكرون.
Do not marry unbelieving women, idolaters, until they profess Iman. A captive Muslim man is better than a free mushrik man regardless of how pleasing he may appear. It is because marriage between persons of different ideologies makes family life a veritable hell. This is why Allah's law prevents you from such a union. On the other hand, marriage between spouses with a similar ideology creates a paradisiacal family life. Divine law wants to bestow on you the contentments of paradisiac life and protects you from various pitfalls. Allah explains to mankind His laws clearly so that they may see the truth laid open before them. At another place it is said, 5.
والمحصنات من المؤمنات.
Chaste mu'min women, which means that it is necessary for the woman to be a Muslimah. B. Muslim men can marry women from amongst the people of the book, 5. Chaste women from amongst the people of the book are also made lawful to you under conditions laid down for marrying the Muslim women. But a Muslim woman cannot marry a non-Muslim man, 5.
والمحصنات من الذين أوتوا الكتاب.
It clarifies the issue that Muslim men can marry women from the people of the book but Muslim women cannot marry their men. It therefore implies that Muslim men can marry Muslim women, or women from people of the book, and 2. Muslim women can marry only Muslim men. Remember that marriage between a Muslim man and a woman from the people of book is only permitted, it is not an injunction. An Islamic state can suspend this permission for a period for the sake of social exigencies or those pertaining to deen. However, it cannot repeal this injunction, it can only suspend it for a period. For example, the prohibition of selling meat for 2 days every week as it is practiced in Pakistan these days. See, according to verses 420 to 24, the following women are declared unlawful for marriage, with Muslim men, mothers, real or foster, those who have suckled you, daughters, sisters, fathers' sisters, mothers' sisters, brothers' daughters, sisters' daughters, women who have suckled you and girls with whom you have shared the suck, your foster sisters, your wives' mothers, your stepdaughters under your guardianship, born of your wives to whom you have gone in, no prohibition if you have not gone in, those who have been wives of your sons proceeding from your loins, and 2 sisters in wedlock at one and the same times, except for what is past, for Allah is oft-forgiving, most merciful. The word musana means pious and chaste women, it also means married women. The latter meaning is applicable here. The Holy Quran has not given the details of breastfeeding itself, that is, as to how the condition of suckling is fulfilled, neither has it laid down how the condition of being a foster sister, sharing one mother's milk with you, is satisfied. Its details shall be ascertained by the Islamic State. Remember that only that woman shall be unlawful to you who has suckled you or the girl who has shared the suck. It has been said above that those women who are already married are also unlawful, yet the Quran did make an exception in it. The women who had migrated from Mecca and their husbands were present, it is apparent that those husbands were non-Muslims, otherwise they could also have migrated, were also permitted for marriage. 610, an Islamic state can issue special orders in the light of this exception, if such circumstances reoccur in any country. Note, adopted relations do not become real, thus it is said, 33:4.
وما جعل أدعياءكم أبناءكم.
Nor has he made your adopted sons as real sons. It shall be applicable to all adopted sons as real sons. It shall be applicable to all adopted relations. It shows that the Quran gives no legal status to adopted relations. In Surah An-Nur, a verse says, 24:3.
الزاني لا ينكح إلا زانية أو مشركة والزانية لا ينكحها إلا زان أو مشرك وحرم ذلك على المؤمنين.
A man guilty of adultery or fornication marries only a woman similarly guilty or a mashirka woman, and a woman guilty of adultery or fornication can be married only by a man similarly guilty or by a mushrik man, that is unlawful for mu'mineen. But we do not consider this purport as true. The ensuing results from this are apparent. In our view, the word nikah in this verse has been used for cohabitation, which is its basic meaning. Thus the verses mean as follows: if any of the believing man or a believing woman is determined to remain chaste, adultery or fornication cannot occur. It can occur only by their mutual consent. The question of zina bil jabr, rape, is different. Only those people commit this crime who do not believe in the divine laws. Believers cannot act as such. Thus, this verse emphasizes and vividly explains the abomination of the act of fornication. That is why we have not given it in the list of muharramat, persons between whom marriage is unlawful. As stated before, in the early days of Islam there were such women in Mecca as had embraced Islam themselves, but their husbands did not, and they had migrated to Medina leaving their husbands. Believing men should marry them. 60:10. From this it can be deduced that by abandoning Islam, the marriage automatically gets dissolved. But its legal decision lies with the Islamic government. 6. Polygamy. The Quran has prescribed monogamy, one wife at a time, as a matter of rule. In case of constancy becoming extremely difficult with the wife, details shall be discussed under the heading divorce. A second wife is allowed in her place, for 20.
وإن أردتم استبدال زوج مكان زوج.
And if you decide to take a wife in the place of another, let it be made clear immediately that it does not mean that you are free to divorce your wife any time you like and bring another one in her place. The conditions under which divorce can be resorted to are being described in a separate chapter. Monogamy is the principle laid down by the Quran. But if any particular circumstances crop up in society, for example on account of war, when the number of widows and young girls increases and there is no satisfactory remedy for it is in view, the Islamic government can allow a man to marry more than one woman, up to 4, making an exception in the one-wife rule. But there are two essential conditions under which it can be allowed: firstly, that the man doing so can do justice with his wives, and secondly, that he is capable of supporting this large family. If any of these two conditions cannot be fulfilled, the second marriage is not allowed. Surah An-Nisa states, 4:3.
وإن خفتم ألا تقسطوا في اليتامى فانكحوا ما طاب لكم من النساء مثنى وثلاث ورباع فإن خفتم ألا تعدلوا فواحدة أو ما ملكت أيمانكم ذلك أدنى ألا تعول.
If ever such circumstances occur, for example on account of a war, that in the society men are lost, perished, and widows, and orphans, boys and girls, increase, especially women without husbands. Ziyada Manasseh, for 127, an inequitable and just solution cannot otherwise be found. Under such circumstances it is allowed, for the sake of protection of these widows and orphans, that you can marry out of these women whom you like, those who are willing to marry you. 419. For this purpose, exception is given in the principle of one wife at a time. In such an event, as the circumstances require and as the society decides, 2 or 3, or 4 wives at a time, can be taken in marriage. But if you feel that in so doing you shall not be able to keep the scales of justice balanced amongst the different family members, then one man and one wife shall remain the law, or the female slaves that you already possess, have brought in your nikah. After the advent of Islam, the custom of acquiring captives was abolished. In respect of possessing female captives, the words "you already possess" are to be taken special note of. Limiting to one wife is a much better course to avoid injustice in the family and to avoid additional encumbrance due to abundance of progeny. This is the only verse in the Quran that allows polygamy, and as can be observed, it is conditional. If you fear that you shall not be able to deal justly with the orphans, then only one wife is allowed. Without the occurrence of this condition, polygamy is disallowed. Let it be made clear that the word is not limited to mean only orphan boys and girls. The unmarried girls and women are also included in it. See Lughatul Quran. In the Quran itself you find the word, for 127, that is orphan, widow, women. As regards the condition of maintaining justice, it is not possible in this respect. Here justice means that you do not become so deeply inclined towards one wife that the other is left unattended to and uncared for. For 129.
ولن تستطيعوا أن تعدلوا بين النساء ولو حرصتم فلا تميلوا كل الميل فتذروها كالمعلقة وإن تصلحوا وتتقوا فإن الله كان غفورا رحيما.
Remember that under the circumstances explained in verse 4:3, when you marry more than one wife you shall have to deal with them justly. As far as love and affection is concerned, it is impossible to deal with different wives equally. You will not be able to do so, no matter how much you desire it, because such things are related to emotions, and equality in sentiments is just not possible. Here the justice which is aimed at, and which is possible, is that you do not become so much devoted to one wife that the other remains totally neglected. However, in social matters deal with them on the basis of equality. This shall meet the demand of justice according to the divine law, and by so doing you shall be protected against the pernicious effects of emotional imbalance. The divine law in this manner makes room for your protection and nourishment. Remember that when a nation feels the urgency to solve the problem of widows and orphans, the women also shall take equal part in this decision, men alone shall not decide it. It shows that even under the extraordinary circumstances the consent of the first wife shall be mandatory, otherwise the home shall turn into a hell. Except under the circumstances described above, a second wife is not allowed. 7. Female captives. During the period when the Quran was revealed, the slaves, captives, both men and women, were part of the Arab society. The Quran closed the door of slavery, and captive women who were part of the household, were either made a part of the respective families, were taken into wedlock, or were gradually freed. The words "whenever they occur in the Quran" mean those captive women who were present in those days. Now the question of slave women does not arise. 8. Facilitations for marriage. The society ought to provide facilities to those who possess competence for marriage. The Quran addresses the Islamic society by saying, 24:32,
وأنكحوا الأيام منكم.
Make proper arrangement for the marriage of those men or women who have not got the adequate facilities for marriage. But to get married is not an injunction. It is not necessary that men or women must get married. Those who wish to lead an unmarried life and for whom the means to get married are not available, should control their passions, abstain, 24:33.
وليستعفف الذين لا يجدون نكاحا.
Those who prefer a celibate life or have not the wherewithal for marriage, should exercise self-control. During a state of extreme hunger, the Holy Quran has allowed the eating of unlawful things, according to need, but has not allowed fornication or adultery to satisfy one's sexual passions. Obviously, man does not possess control over hunger, but on the other hand sexual urges are purely thought-motivated. Therefore, the question of sexual constraint, helplessness, does not arise. An Islamic society creates an environment in which sexual stimulations are least liable to occur. 9. Sexual intercourse. Sexual intercourse is prohibited under the following conditions. A. During menstruation. B. While fasting. However, it is permitted during nights, in the month of Ramadan, before the start and after termination of the fast. C. While one is in retreat, itikaf, in the mosques. During the month of Ramadan. 10. Object of sexual intercourse. The Quran says, 2:223,
نساؤكم حرث لكم فأتوا حرثكم أن شئتم.
Your wives are as a tilth unto you, so approach your tilths when you so desire. This brings forth an important fact: one goes to the tilth in order to sow the seeds, therefore the object of sexual intercourse ought to be the augmentation of human race, not pleasure alone. This augmentation ought to be thoughtfully planned. It should not only meet personal requirements but also collective social exigencies. Approach the tilth means that you have sexual intercourse when you desire to have a child. This system of controlled mating prevails in nature. At yet another place the words 4:24
محصنين غير مسافحين
have been used for it, which means that the object of marriage is fortification of your procreative energies within the bounds of wedlock and not the mere satisfaction of your lust, not to let your semen flow out purposelessly. However, this is our deduction from the verses of the Quran. 11. The object of matrimonial life. The object of matrimonial life is that a husband and a wife cultivate love and companionship, so as to make life tranquil at home, life of peace and solace. Thus, it is said, 30:21.
ومن آياته أن خلق لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا لتسكنوا إليها وجعل بينكم مودة ورحمة إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يتفكرون.
Among his signs is that he created for you mates from among yourselves, that you may dwell in tranquility with them, and as such he has created such a deep relationship between yourselves, as a means of actualization of potentialities for both of you. Verily in that are signs for those who reflect. As to how much concord is present in the relationship between husband and wife, the Quran has beautifully described a metaphor, when it is said, 187.
هن لباس لكم وأنتم لباس لهن.
They are an apparel for you, and you are an apparel for them. As far as the mutual rights and obligations are concerned, the Quran has condensed it in one comprehensive sentence when it said, 228.
ولهن مثل الذي عليهن بالمعروف.
The obligations of women shall be equal to their rights, one obligation against each right. It has been described earlier that in view of the duties incumbent upon women, on account of their biological structure, the responsibility of earning sustenance for them rests upon men, 434. The relationship also expands through marriages. Relationships of marriage, in-laws, come into existence in addition to the relationship of lineage, 2554.
فجعله نسبا وصهرا.
In it are included both relationships of lineage and of in-laws. 12. Dower. In Surah An-Nisa, after giving the details of those between whom marriage is unlawful, it is said, 424:5.
وأحل لكم ما وراء ذلكم أن تبتغوا بأموالكم.
Except such women, others are lawful provided you seek them in marriage, with gifts from your property. The term mar, dower, is used for these gifts in fiqh, jurisprudence. The word mar does not occur in the Quran, instead the word zahor or saduka have been used. The Quran has explained it further that, mar, is not a compensation for anything. This is a gift, without the concept of remuneration or reward. The Quran has also used the word naila for it, 4:4.
وآتوا النساء صدقاتهن نحلة.
And give the women, on marriage, their dower as free gift. In giving a gift is no concept of gain or compensation. No amount for dower has been stipulated by the Quran. Anything decided by mutual consent is mar, but because its payment is essential, it has also been termed a duty, divine command, 236-237, therefore it ought to be proportionate to one's economic status. In this connection guidance is also available in 236. It might expand to a heap of gold, for 20, in this verse kintar means a heap of gold. The payment of dower ought to be made soon after nikah at the time of marriage. But it is evident from the verse 236 of Surah Al-Baqarah that an occasion may arise when the amount of dower could not be fixed at the time of marriage. In this verse it has been explained, 236.
لا جناح عليكم إن طلقتم النساء ما لم تمسوهن أو تفرضوا لهن فريضة.
There is no blame on you if you divorce women before consummation or the fixation of their dower. It means that if for some reason the amount of dower could not be fixed at the time of marriage, it can be determined later on. Dower is the property of the woman, no one has the right to deprive her of this amount. However, a woman can remit a part thereof if she so desires. 4:4.
وآتوا النساء صدقاتهن نحلة فإن طبن لكم عن شيء منه نفسا فكلوه هنيئا مريئا.
Pay the dower of your wives without any notion of a reward, like the honeybee giving her honey, there is no concept of reward in it. Since dower is a gift and not an exchange, woman cheerfully remits a part of it, you can by all means use it for yourself. A little later in the same surah has been said that the amount of dower can be altered by mutual consent. In the words of the Quran, 4:24.
ولا جناح عليكم فيما تراضيتم به من بعد الفريضة.
But if you agree mutually to vary the dower after it has been prescribed, there is no blame on you. After marriage, if divorce occurs before consummation, then if dower has not been fixed, then the man ought to pay something according to his economic status. Surah Al-Baqarah says, 236, 33-49.
لا جناح عليكم إن طلقتم النساء ما لم تمسوهن أو تفرضوا لهن فريضة ومتعوهن على الموسع قدره وعلى المقتر قدره متاعا بالمعروف حقا على المحسنين.
There is no blame on you if you divorce women before consummation or the fixing of their dower, but bestow on them a suitable gift, the wealthy according to his means and the poor according to his means, so that the loss she has thus suffered may be made good to a certain extent. Gift of reasonable amount is due from those who wish to do the right thing. 2. If dower was fixed, half of it shall have to be paid, but if the woman or her agent so agrees, or if the court of law thinks it necessary under certain circumstances, it can also be remitted fully. 237.
وإن طلقتموهن من قبل أن تمسوهن وقد فرضتم لهن فريضة فنصف ما فرضتم إلا أن يعفون أو يعفو الذي بيده عقدة النكاح وأن تعفوا أقرب للتقوى ولا تنسوا الفضل بينكم إن الله بما تعملون بصير.
And if you divorce them before consummation, and the dower had been fixed, half of the dower is due to them, unless they forego it willingly, or it is remitted by him in whose hands is the marriage tie. And to forego what is due to you is nearer to taqwa, adherence to Allah's law. And forget not that you have to act with grace towards one another. Surely Allah sees all what you do. Verse 237 should be kept in mind, in whose hands is the marriage tie. It is often deduced from this that the marriage tie is in the hands of the husband, keeping in mind the common concept that only the man has a right to divorce. But in our viewpoint this deduction is not correct. We shall elaborate on that later. According to the Holy Quran, the right to divorce belongs equally to the man as well as to the woman. Here the meaning of the words can mean the woman's agent in the court of law, or the court of law itself. See also chapter on talaq divorce. If a woman is guilty of immodesty, something can be deducted from her dower. 419.
يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا يحل لكم أن ترثوا النساء كرها ولا تعضلوهن لتذهبوا ببعض ما آتيتموهن إلا أن يأتين بفاحشة مبينة.
O you who believe! As has been said in 4:3, that a man should exercise his choice in marrying a woman, likewise the consent of woman is also necessary for marriage. You are forbidden to become masters of women forcibly, against their will, nor is it justifiable for you to keep them against their will with the intent of bargaining to recover a part of what you have paid them. This is not permitted except where they have been guilty of open immodesty. In such a case the court can allow you a part of it. It is apparent that a case like this can only be decided by the law court. If a woman demands divorce, and the court of law agrees, she shall have to pay something for it. 229. It may not necessarily be out of the dower money. This is only for reference sake, details shall come under the heading divorce. Note, dowry, the paraphernalia of a bride, is merely a custom which has not been ordained by the Quran. It is extremely unfair on the part of man to demand jahez, dowry. The Quran has ordained man to give something, not to take anything from the woman. This is a Hindu custom which Muslims have appropriated. 13. Maintenance. As has been stated earlier, the provision of sustenance of the wife is the responsibility of her husband. 434. Therefore, as long as she remains in his wedlock, he shall be responsible. This includes the place of residence as well. During the waiting period of a divorced woman, that is during iddat, the above stated responsibility shall lie on the husband. 241, 65:1, 65:6-7, except when she is guilty of immodesty. 65:1. Details shall be found under the heading iddat, waiting period of a divorced woman. As regards a widow, the responsibility for her maintenance still lies on the man for a period of 1 year. Therefore he ought to leave a will for her, but this responsibility remains no more if and when she leaves the home of the deceased husband of her own free will. Details shall be given under the heading inheritance. 14. Strained relations. As described earlier, the object of marriage is to lead a life full of love and tranquility, thus a careful selection of partners is an utmost necessity. Yet circumstances may arise when mutual relations become strained. In some events unpleasantness may be temporary, owing to tempers being volatile. For example, a person, while angry, begins to talk absurdly or on account of ignorance, calls his wife mother, or anything like that. This is termed zihar in technical terms, and when the rage cools down he feels ashamed. The Quran says that such foolish talk, an oath, should not be taken seriously. 225.
لا يؤاخذكم الله باللغو في أيمانكم ولكن يؤاخذكم بما كسبت قلوبكم.
Allah will not call you to account for absurd oaths, but you will be accountable for such oaths that are taken with the intention of your hearts. Also 589, by calling your wife mother, she does not actually become your mother. 33:4.
وما جعل أزواجكم اللائي تظاهرون منهن أمهاتكم.
Nor has he made your wives, when you express so by zihar, your mothers. Such foolish behavior makes family atmosphere venomous. The Quran, therefore, considers it necessary to penalize such behavior. In such cases before the resumption of sexual relations, the Quran ordains, freeing a slave. This relates to the period when slaves were present. B. If slaves are not found, fasting for 2 months. C. If one lacks endurance, for fasting for 2 months, them feeding 60 indigents. In Surah Mujadila it is said, 58:3-4.
والذين يظاهرون من نسائهم ثم يعودون لما قالوا فتحرير رقبة من قبل أن يتمسى ذلكم توعظون به والله بما تعملون خبير فمن لم يجد فصيام شهرين متتابعين من قبل أن يتمسى فمن لم يستطع فإطعام 60 مسكينا ذلك لتؤمنوا بالله ورسوله وتلك حدود الله وللكافرين عذاب أليم.
But those who call their wives mothers, or something like that, then wish to go back on the words they had uttered, it is ordained that such a one should free a slave, before they copulate. To this you are exhorted, and Allah is well acquainted with all that you do. And if anyone who has not the means, he should fast for 2 months consecutively, before he copulates. But if one is unable to do even that, he should feed 60 indigent ones. This is to ensure that you do profess, Iman, a firm belief in the divine system which has been established by the Rasul. It is essential for a believer to keep himself bound by the limits laid down by Allah. In case one makes a mistake, its compensation lies in the steps described above. But the people who reject these limits are non-believers and there is a tormenting chastisement for them. 2. The above relates to absurd oaths while in a state of anger. But if someone willfully takes an oath not to go to his wife, the term ELA is used for it in Arabic. Such a state cannot be allowed to continue indefinitely. The Quran has ordained that such a person should decide within 4 months whether he wants to keep his wife in wedlock or not. 226-227.
للذين يؤلون من نسائهم تربص 4 أشهر فإن فاءوا فإن الله غفور رحيم وإن عزموا الطلاق فإن الله سميع عليم.
For those who take an oath of abstention from their wives, a waiting period of 4 months is ordained, because a woman cannot be left in this condition for an unlimited period. If then they return to their ordinary life, they are allowed, because a room has been left for forgiveness and protection in such falterings. 95:89, 33:4, 58:3, that is like penalty for breaking an oath. But if their intention is firm for divorce, they should proceed in accordance with the divine law, which is from Allah who is all-hearing, all-knowing. He knows that separation is the better course in such cases. An Islamic state can formulate necessary laws for those who do not want to keep their wives with them or for those whose whereabouts become unknown. The aim is to provide protection to the rights of a woman and not to leave her entirely at the mercy of her husband. 15. Divorce. Nikah is a contract between a sensible and mature man and woman to lead a married life. The Quran provides such instructions under which this contract is fulfilled with beauty and proportion, because the social life of a nation depends on agreeable and favorable environments within the home itself. This forms the basis for the proper upbringing of a nation. But if in spite of all that, occasion arises when it becomes impossible for them to live together, the Quran allows separation, after the dissolution of the contract of marriage. This act is called divorce. Keep in mind this meaning of the word divorce. The case of marriage was left to the mutual consent of both parties on account of its being a personal affair, but the dissolution of marriage remains no more a personal affair because it affects the opposite party as well as their offsprings in most cases. Thus, it becomes a collective society affair, for which instructions have been laid down by the Quran. There is one thing in this case which is important and which needs clarification, whereas mutual discretion of both parties was essential for marriage. As such, the dissolution of marriage cannot take place by the consent of one party alone. The husband cannot be allowed to declare divorce of his own free will whenever he so likes and turn his wife out from the house, while on the other hand the other party, wife, be made so helpless that she is compelled to bear many hardships in order to be able to get rid of this commitment. The Quran has ordained equal rights and obligations for a husband and a wife. Their position is equal in this respect also. Let us look at the instructions it gives to society. It says, 435.
وإن خفتم شقاق بينهما فابعثوا حكما من أهله وحكما من أهلها إن يريد إصلاحا يوفق الله بينهما إن الله كان عليما خبيرا.
If you fear a breach between them, the couple, the concerned authority should constitute a board of arbitration consisting of 2 members, one from his family and the other from hers. Thus, if the husband and the wife make up their minds for reconciliation, the two arbiters should attempt to bring them close to each other. The divine law shall bring about reconciliation because the law is based on Allah's knowledge, who is acquainted with all things. The term includes both man and woman. The complainant may be the man or the woman. In both cases it is the duty of society to appoint an arbitration board. If the woman feels an excess or disinclination from her husband, even then they try to patch up their differences amongst themselves or ask for a board of arbitration to be appointed. Thus, it said, 128.
وإن امرأة خافت من بعلها نشوزا أو إعراضا فلا جناح عليهما أن يصلح بينهما صلحا والصلح خير.
And if a woman fears ill usage from her husband or desertion, no blame is on them if they effect a reconciliation between them, for amicable settlement is always good, or otherwise ask for the appointment of a board of arbitration. In Surah Al-Mujadila, 58th chapter of the Quran, it is said, 58:1.
قد سمع الله قول التي تجادلك في زوجها وتشتكي إلى الله والله يسمع تحاوركم إن الله سميع بصير.
Allah has indeed heard the woman who was disputing with you concerning her husband and complaining to Allah about the maltreatment she was receiving at the hands of her husband, and Allah was hearing the contentions of both of you. Surely Allah hears and sees all things. This also makes it clear that a woman can take her case to a court of law and has full right to apply for divorce. However, the first priority of the court of arbitration shall be to bring about reconciliation between them. Remember, the Quran has used the term talaq, divorce, both in respect of the husband and the wife. The term khula, divorce obtained by a wife against a ransom by herself or through an attorney, is nowhere to be found in the Quran. Moreover, when it is said that a husband has delegated his right of divorce to his wife, this is not correct, according to the Holy Quran, because husband and wife have equal rights of divorce. Delegating the right of divorce by husband, tafwiz in juristic terminology, makes no sense. If reconciliation cannot be brought about, the court which has convened the board of arbitration shall declare dissolution of marriage. This shall be known as divorce. It is said in Surah At-Talaq, 65th chapter of the Quran, 65:1.
يا أيها النبي إذا طلقتم النساء فطلقوهن لعدتهن.
O Rasul, when you pronounce decisions on divorce cases, tell the people concerned that after this, the divorce, the issue of counting period, iddat, is a matter of great importance and must be completed. The Rasul has been addressed in the verse, 65:1, by the words when you divorce women. Here the word used is talaqtum, which is plural. Thus, the matter does not concern the divorce of any wife of the Rasul himself. Such a question never arose. As a matter of fact, it is the status of the Rasul as a judge that is being addressed. Thus, the word talaqtum means when you decide the divorce cases of women. It makes clear that divorce is not an individual affair, allowing a man to divorce his wife any time he likes. Such decisions shall only be announced by duly authorized courts. The court first appoints a board of arbitration, and if reconciliation fails, then it decrees the divorce. Because the calculation of the period of iddat depends upon the number of menstrual periods, the execution of divorce ought to take place after the last menstrual period is over. In the above said verse, 65:1, after the words come the words meaning to count, accurately. The court shall make this point clear in its decision. If the court finds that the husband does not want a reconciliation, it shall grant a divorce, without taking anything back, of the dower money, from the wife. It is thus said in Surah An-Nisa, 4th chapter of the Quran, 4:20-21.
وإن أردتم استبدال زوج مكان زوج وآتيتم إحداهن قنطارا فلا تأخذوا منه شيئا أتأخذونه بهتانا وإثما مبينا وكيف تأخذونه وقد أفضى بعضكم إلى بعض وأخذن منكم ميثاقا غليظا.
If you intend to take another woman in place of your present wife, it does, in no way, mean that the desire to bring in a new wife can become a reason for divorce. It only means that if, according to the conditions laid down which were mentioned earlier, the matter reaches the stage of divorce, and you have given the latter a whole treasure, heap of gold, as dower, you should not take back even a portion of it. However, if the demand for a divorce was initiated by the wife, 2:29, or the wife is guilty of immodesty, 4:19, a part can be retrieved from her. In case no such conditions prevail, then you should not slander her or accuse her of open wrong in order to compel her to surrender a part of her dower. How can you do such a thing when your wives have taken a solemn covenant from you, and you also have enjoyed marital relations with each other? But if the woman is guilty of a shameful act which leads to adultery or fornication, then, for 19.
ولا تعضلوهن لتذهبوا ببعض ما آتيتموهن إلا أن يأتين بفاحشة مبينة.
It is not lawful for you to try to detain them forcibly so that you may fraudulently take away part of the dower that you have given them, except when they have been guilty of open immodesty. Or if she herself is unwilling to live with her husband, the court can order some compensation to be paid to the husband. 229.
ولا يحل لكم أن تأخذوا مما آتيتموهن شيئا إلا أن يخافا ألا يقيما حدود الله فإن خفتم ألا يقيما حدود الله فلا جناح عليهما فيما افتدت به.
In case of dissolution of marriage, it is not lawful for you, men, to take back any of your gifts from your wives, except when a situation arises that this money is blocking the way to the finalization of divorce, and on the other hand on account of strained relations. In case of the continuation of their marital relationship, both parties fear that they would not be able to safeguard the limits ordained by Allah, in faithfully discharging their obligations, and the society's judicial system also reaches the same conclusion. There is no blame on either of them if she gives something for her freedom from the bonds of marriage. Such conditions may arise that a woman gets married with ill intentions, and having received the dower money, takes steps to seek divorce. In such cases, forgiving a part of the dower shall serve as a deterrent against such nefarious designs. After the court declares divorce, the period of iddat shall begin. Iddat means the prescribed period before the end of which the woman cannot marry again. Details are given under the heading iddat. It may be termed as waiting period. During this period of iddat, the divorced woman shall continue to reside in her ex-husband's house, and he is responsible of her maintenance. What the Quran has said further, in this regard, needs careful attention. It is said in Surah At-Talaq, 65th chapter of the Quran, 65-2.
فإذا بلغن أجلهن فأمسكوهن بمعروف أو فارقوهن بمعروف.
Then when they, the divorced women, complete their appointed term, either take them back in the recognized manner or part from them according to the law. In Surah Al-Baqarah, 2nd chapter of the Quran, it is said, 229.
فإمساك بمعروف أو تسريح بإحسان.
After that either keep them according to the law or separate them with benevolence. Again, it is said, 228.
وبعولتهن أحق بردهن في ذلك إن أرادوا إصلاحا.
And their husbands have a better right to take them back in that period, if they wish for reconciliation. It is apparent from the above that during the period of iddat a chance is given to rebuild the marital relationships. This clarifies two issues. If the wife is the one to initiate the divorce, then this means she does not want to live with her husband, and he then cannot keep her back forcibly. However, it is a different thing if she changes her mind. B. If it is the husband who initiates the divorce, although she wants to live with him, the relationship can be re-established if he changes his mind. In such an event, the Quran has warned the husband not to keep the wife back with the intention of vexing her. 231.
ولا تمسكوهن ضرارا لتعتدوا ومن يفعل ذلك فقد ظلم نفسه.
Do not take them back with the intention of causing them harm or to transgress the limits imposed by Allah. If anyone does so, he only wrongs his own self. The question now arises, is a renewal of the contract of marriage needed, or the previous contract shall be considered sufficient? In this respect the Quran has used the term bil ma'ruf, which means a procedure recognized by the Islamic society in the light of the Quranic guidance. Thus, if the Islamic society thinks that a renewal of the contract of marriage is unnecessary, it shall be the correct decision. And if it decides that a renewal is called for, that too shall be a correct decision. After all, nikah, the contract of marriage, is nothing more than the recognition of the consent of a husband and his wife. However, in verse 232, the Quran has used the word nikah when it is said, 232.
وإذا طلقتم النساء فبلغن أجلهن فلا تعضلوهن أن ينكحن أزواجهن إذا تراضوا بينهم بالمعروف.
When you divorce women, and they are near the completion of the term of their iddat and both man and the wife are desirous to resume their matrimonial life, O members of the society, do not prevent them from marrying their former husbands if they mutually agree. Here again the word bil ma'ruf is used, which means according to the way recognized by the system of the state. However, the government ought to keep it in mind that the renewal of marriage during the period of iddat ought to be carried out in a way which may be considered a contract of marriage. If they have made up their minds to live together again, it shall be carried out according to the above procedure, but if they decide on separation, 2 witnesses shall be required. 65-2.
فإذا بلغن أجلهن فأمسكوهن بمعروف أو فارقوهن بمعروف وأشهدوا ذوي عدل منكم وأقيموا الشهادة لله.
Then, when they approach the end of the term appointed, look at the whole issue in a cool, dispassionate manner, and if constancy appears possible, why resort to separation? Get united in a recognized manner, but if constancy is not possible, part from them on the recognized terms and take for witness 2 persons from among you imbued with justice, that is those who are not inclined to any one party, and establish evidence as a duty ordained by Allah. After this, the facilities available to them, the women, in the period of iddat shall come to an end. Thus, the husband and the wife may reunite during the period of iddat or may get separated. This shall be counted as one divorce. If this couple again becomes husband and wife, during or after the period of iddat, but again decide to separate, its procedure shall be the same as described above. This shall be the second divorce. After this second divorce, if they once again decide reunion but this also results in third divorce, they cannot become husband and wife again, neither during the period of iddat, nor any time thereafter, because, 229.
الطلاق مرتان فإمساك بمعروف أو تسريح بإحسان.
A divorce is only permissible twice, after that the parties should either hold together on the recognized terms or separate with kindness. That is, after the third divorce, remarriage is not permissible. However, if after the third divorce the woman gets married to some other person but here also the union ends in divorce, or if she becomes a widow, she can again establish the contract of marriage with the first husband. This has been explained as such in the verses 2:29 and 2:30.
الطلاق مرتان فإمساك بمعروف أو تسريح بإحسان ولا يحل لكم أن تأخذوا مما آتيتموهن شيئا إلا أن يخافا ألا يقيما حدود الله فإن خفتم ألا يقيما حدود الله فلا جناح عليهما فيما افتدت به تلك حدود الله فلا تعتدوها ومن يتعد حدود الله فأولئك هم الظالمون فإن طلقها فلا تحل له من بعد حتى تنكح زوجا غيره فإن طلقها فلا جناح عليهما أن يتراجعا إن ظنا أن يقيما حدود الله وتلك حدود الله يبينها لقوم يعلمون.
Remember, during the married life of a husband and wife, it is possible only twice to either hold together on the recognized terms or separate with kindness. But if the divorce between them takes place the third time, they shall not be able to remarry. 2:30. In case of dissolution of marriage, you are not permitted to take back anything of what you have given to the wife. However, if an occasion arises that this very factor becomes an impediment in the way of dissolution of marriage, and at the same time there is an apprehension that in case of living together as husband and wife they shall not be able to keep the limits laid down by the divine law, on account of their deranged relations, and also the society's system of justice reaches the same conclusion that the husband ought to get some recompense, in that case there is no harm that the wife may agree to forego a part of what is rightfully hers and get herself rid of the martial contract. These are the limits imposed by Allah, do not transgress them, and whosoever does so, would be held guilty by the divine order. So, if a husband divorces his wife, irrevocably, he cannot, after that, remarry her until after she has married another husband, and he has divorced her. In that case, there is no blame on either of them, if they reunite, provided they feel that they can keep the limits ordained by Allah. Such are the limits ordained by Allah, which he makes plain to those who possess the knowledge of the exigencies of social life. These are the verses which are produced as an evidence to prove that if somebody says divorce, divorce, divorce 3 times, they shall have to go through the process of halala. This interpretation of the above verse is against the Quran. As explained earlier, divorce means freedom from the contract of marriage. The dissolution of marriage can take place only by following the details described above. Divorce does not become valid by the verbal utterance of the word divorce, whether it is repeated once, thrice, or 100 times. 3 divorces mean the dissolution of nikah between a husband and his wife, 3 times during their married life spread over a period of time. After 2 dissolutions there still remains a chance for reunion, but after the 3rd dissolution there is no chance it is final, except under the condition described above. Even in that case marriage with another husband does not mean sexual intercourse for one night, halala. It means to live the life of a husband and wife in a regular normal way. As it has been said earlier, the dower ought to be paid during the process of marriage contract. But if the wife has postponed its receipt for a later period, it shall now become an urgent recovery after the dissolution of the marriage. See heading Dower. 16. Waiting period for a divorcee, iddat. Iddat is the name given to a period in which a divorced woman or a widow cannot remarry. In fact, it is meant to make sure if she is pregnant, and in case of pregnancy, the would-be child shall be the legitimate offspring of the former husband. There is no iddat for man. The Quran says, 228.
ولهن مثل الذي عليهن بالمعروف وللرجال عليهن درجة.
Women have the right relative to their obligations, but men have an advantage over them. The advantage is that there is no iddat for man. He can marry another woman immediately after divorce. B. The iddat for a divorced woman is 3 menstrual periods, 228. The divorce comes into effect after the menstrual period comes to an end. This is for the sake of certainty in the counting of iddat, 65:1. C. For old women who have reached menopause or for those who do not menstruate on account of a disease, iddat shall be 3 months, 65:4. As stated in verse 228, the period of iddat, normally, is 3 menstruations, but
واللائي يئسن من المحيض من نسائكم إن أرتبتم فعدتهن 3 أشهر واللائي لم يحضن.
Such of your women as have attained the age of menopause, for them the prescribed period is 3 months, and for those who have no courses, on account of disease, it is the same. D. Iddat for a pregnant woman is until the termination of pregnancy. 65:4.
وأولاة الأحمال أجلهن أن يضعن حملهن.
For those who are pregnant, iddat is until they deliver their burdens. They should declare, in the event of divorce, that they are pregnant, 228, nor is it lawful for them to hide what Allah has created in their wombs. E. There is no iddat for a woman who was divorced before sexual intercourse, 33:49.
يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نكحتم المؤمنات ثم طلقتموهن من قبل أن تمسوهن فما لكم عليهن من عدة تعتدونها فمتعوهن وسرحوهن سراحا جميلا.
O you who believe! When you marry believing women and then divorce them before you have touched them, it is not required of you to count the iddat in respect of them, during which period the responsibility of their sustenance lies with you and the women cannot marry any other husband, so give them suitable provision and part from them in a goodly manner. Marriage is a contract. When you find it difficult to carry out the contract, end it in a lawful manner. There is no need to create bitterness, 228-236, 65:1-4. F. Iddat for a widow is 4 months and 10 days. 234.
والذين يتوفون منكم ويذرون أزواجا يتربصن بأنفسهن 4 أشهر و10.
If any of you dies and leaves his widows behind, they shall wait for 4 months and 10 days, for second marriage. When the iddat ends, they are free to make a decision about themselves according to law. They have the right to do so. There shall be no blame on them that they have done this way or that way. Remember, Allah knows all that you do. In case she is pregnant, there is no separate injunction in the Quran for it. But it can be deduced from the injunctions regarding divorced, pregnant, women, that their iddat shall also be until they give birth. G. During the period of iddat the responsibility for providing daily requirements and shelter shall be on the man and its standard shall be the same as during normal life. It is said in Surah At-Talaq, 65th chapter of the Quran, 65:6-7, 241.
أسكنوهن من حيث سكنتم من ودكم ولا تضروهن لتضيقوا عليهن وإن كن أولات حمل فأنفقوا عليهن حتى يضعن حملهن فإن أرضعن لكم فآتوهن أجورهن وأتمروا بينكم بمعروف وإن تعاسرتم فسترضع له أخرى لينفق ذو سعة من سعته ومن قدر عليه رزقه فلينفق مما آتاه الله لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا ما آتاها سيجعل الله بعد عسر يسرا.
Let the women live, during iddat period, in the same style as you live, according to your means, annoy them not so as to tease them. And if they are pregnant, you have to provide their sustenance until their delivery, and if they suckle your offspring, for your sake, that is, if you cannot make any arrangement for the suckling and by mutual consent it is settled that she herself shall suckle, give them their due recompense, and enjoin one another to do good, and if you disagree, another will suckle for him. In determining the scope of providing sustenance to divorcees or compensation for suckling, be considerate of the financial status of the husband. Let the man of means spend according to his means, and the man whose resources are restricted, let him spend according to what Allah has given him. Allah puts no burden on any person beyond what he has been given. If a difficulty arises for the man on account of the extra expenses, a relief can be obtained according to the divine law. The court shall keep this in view. But if during this period the woman commits an act of immodesty, the man then is no more responsible. 65:1.
يا أيها النبي إذا طلقتم النساء فطلقوهن لعدتهن وأحصوا العدة واتقوا الله ربكم لا تخرجوهن من بيوتهن ولا يخرجن إلا أن يأتين بفاحشة مبينة وتلك حدود الله ومن يتعد حدود الله فقد ظلم نفسه.
O Nabi, when you decide the cases of divorce, tell the people that the matter of iddah is of great importance. It must be accomplished adequately. For this, it is necessary that an accurate count of the prescribed period be kept, so as to submit totally to the injunctions laid down by your sustainer, 228 to 236, 33 to 49. During this period do not turn out the divorced women from your houses, 65:2. During the period of iddah these are still their own homes. Nor shall they, themselves, leave without a proper excuse. However, in case they are guilty of some open immodesty, they can be turned out of the house. These are the limits laid down by Allah, and anyone who transgresses the limits of Allah, besides doing wrong to others, he also wrongs his own self. As stated above, the woman should not leave home and go to some other place during iddah. But if conditions are not favorable to stay there, she can stay at some other place by permission of the court. This is our deduction from the Quranic verse, in which it is said, for 130.
وإن يتفرقا يغني الله كلا من سعته.
And if they separate, Allah will render them both free from one out of his ampleness. Allah shall make arrangement for the fulfillment of their needs, that is the society, established under the divine order, shall shoulder this responsibility. H. For 1 year's provision of daily needs and residence, the husband should leave a testament. But if before this, the widow leaves, of her own choice to some other place, this responsibility, of the late husband, comes to an end, 240.
والذين يتوفون منكم ويذرون أزواجا وصية لأزواجهم متاعا إلى الحول غير إخراج فإن خرجن فلا جناح عليكم فيما فعلن في أنفسهن من معروف والله عزيز حكيم.
Those of you who die and leave widows, should make a bequest for their widows for a year's maintenance and residence, but if they leave the residence of their own and make some other arrangement for themselves according to the law, there is no blame on you for what they do with themselves. Remember, the divine law is exalted in power and is based on wisdom. During iddah a widow is not allowed to marry another person, but there is no restriction on discussing the possibility of marriage in the meantime, 235.
علم الله أنكم ستذكرونهن ولكن لا تواعدوهن سررا إلا أن تقولوا قولا معروفا ولا تعزموا عقدة النكاح حتى يبلغ الكتاب أجله واعلموا أن الله يعلم ما في أنفسكم فاحذروه واعلموا أن الله غفور حليم.
There is no blame on you if you make an offer of betrothal or hold it in your hearts. Allah knows that you would fancy to marry them, but do not take any hidden promise of marriage from them, negotiate with them in a recognized manner, but do not resolve on marriage during the period of iddah, and always remain conscious of the fact that Allah is aware of the ideas that flash across your mind. You should know that Allah does not want to inflict any hardship on you by means of these limitations. The object of these restrictions is to protect your society from the injuries of wrong attitudes. He does not get angry by your mistakes, so as to entangle you in strict laws. This is done by tyrant rulers, not by Allah. If, during iddah or afterwards, a woman intends to remarry her former husband, do not stand in her way, 232.
وإذا طلقتم النساء فبلغن أجلهن فلا تعضلوهن أن ينكحن أزواجهن إذا تراضوا بينهم بالمعروف.
When you divorce women and they are nearing the completion of their iddah, do not prevent them from marrying their former husbands if they mutually agree to do so in the recognized manner. Note, this does not apply after the third divorce. 17. Suckling. The Holy Quran does not specify the period during which the mother should suckle the child. The husband and the wife can mutually take a decision subject to the requirements of the child's health. However, the Quran has said that it takes 2.5 years for a mother to keep the fetus in her womb, followed by the suckling of the child. 46:15.
وإذا طلقتم النساء فبلغن أجلهن فلا تعضلوهن أن ينكحن أزواجهن إذا تراضوا بينهم بالمعروف.
We have enjoined upon man to be gracious to his parents. In pain did his mother bear him, and in pain did she give him birth. The carrying of the child to his weaning is a period of 30 months. Even animals take part in the upbringing of their offsprings, but later on, their grown-up offsprings do not even recognize their parents. Thus, the man is asked to rise above the animal level during his life. One of the demands of human life is that he should treat his parents with benevolence. His mother bore him and gave him birth with difficulty, which she experienced day and night. This continued not for a day or two, but it took at least 30 months from pregnancy to weaning. 233, 13-14. At another place the suckling period is described as 2 years, 31-14, as regards a divorced woman who carries a child in her lap. The Quran says, I, the father of the child, shall give the mother recompense for suckling the child. 65:6.
فإن أرضعن لكم فآتوهن أجورهن وأتمروا بينكم بمعروف وإن تعاسرتم فسترضع له أخرى.
And if they suckle the offspring for you, give them their recompense and take mutual counsel together according to what is just and reasonable. If any of you feels that the arrangement is heavy on him, her, arrange for some other woman to suckle the child. 2. Though the period of suckling is 2 years, but if by mutual consent they want to reduce this period, they are allowed to do so. During the period of suckling, the expenses of food and clothing shall be provided for the woman by the father of the child. The standard of this maintenance shall be according to the financial position of the father. For so doing, it ought to be kept in mind that neither the father nor the mother are put into difficulty for the sake of their child. If it is thought advisable that the suckling be given by some other woman in place of the mother, it is permitted. 233.
والوالدات يرضعن أولادهن حولين كاملين لمن أراد أن يتم الرضاعة وعلى المولود له رزقهن وكسوتهن بالمعروف لا تكلف نفس إلا وسعها لا تضر والدة بولدها ولا مولود له بولده وعلى الوارث مثل ذلك فإن أراد فصالا عن تراض منهما وتشاور فلا جناح عليهما وإن أردتم أن تسترضعوا أولادكم فلا جناح عليكم إذا سلمتم ما آتيتم بالمعروف واتقوا الله واعلموا أن الله بما تعملون بصير.
If, in the case of a divorce, the wife is suckling a child, the mothers should give suck to their offspring for 2 whole years, if the father desires to complete the term. But he shall bear the cost of their food and clothing on the prescribed terms. No person shall have a burden laid on him greater than he can bear. The court ought to keep this in mind: the mother shall neither be treated unfairly on account of her child nor the father. If, however, the father dies in the meanwhile, his heir shall be in charge in the same way as had been decided by both of them. On the matter of weaning, if you both agree on premature weaning and make alternative arrangements, there is no blame on them provided the husband pays the settled compensation to the mother. Anyhow, you should always adhere to the divine law and keep this reality in mind that Allah's law of requital oversees what you do. For this, neither observe the law as a mere custom, nor try to evade it. 18. Custody of children of divorced parents. There is no specific injunction in the Holy Quran as to who will have custody of the underage children after the separation of their parents. The court can decide on it according to the prevailing circumstances. The principle that ought to be observed in this case is that neither the father nor the mother shall be put to unnecessary hardships. An inference can be drawn for this rule in the light of verse 233, described above. To achieve this objective, the Islamic government shall also decide as to who shall bear the expenses of the children, till they reach the age of maturity. 19. Progeny. A. Besides mutual companionship, the basic object of married life is the augmentation of the human race. Even animals increase their progeny, but the case is different with man. A young animal needs nourishment, after which it becomes what it is destined to become. But a human child, in addition to sustenance, needs education and upbringing which lifts him from the stage of animal life to the stage of human life. Thus, the parents undertake a dual responsibility. It is the duty of an Islamic state to frame laws for the purpose and make such arrangements that no child is deprived of sustenance, as well as education and upbringing. The Islamic state shall issue necessary guidance to the parents as to what extent their cooperation is required. The objective is that no child is left without the development of his human potentialities on account of negligence, ignorance, laziness, or mismanagement on the part of parents or an incompetent system of government. Every child shall be provided with an equal opportunity for upbringing. The Quran says, 1731, 6:152.
ولا تقتلوا أولادكم خشية إملاق.
Do not kill your offsprings for fear of being reduced to poverty. Here killing does not actually mean putting to death. Murder in itself is a crime, even if it is of one's own children. Here killing children means depriving them of proper education and upbringing. In this regard an Islamic state shall furnish surety that, 6:152.
نحن نرزقهم وإياكم.
We are responsible for your sustenance as well as that of your children. Remember, in an Islamic social order, providing the means of sustenance is the foremost duty of the state. A healthy, sound and sturdy child is a bounty from Allah, 7:189-90, and an intelligent and a chaste youth, with a loving heart and subservient to the divine laws, is a rahmat from him, 19:12-14. In Surah Ash-Shura, 42nd chapter of the Quran, it is said, 42:49-50.
لله ملك السماوات والأرض يخلق ما يشاء يهب لمن يشاء إناثا ويهب لمن يشاء الذكور أو يزوجهم ذكرانا وإناثا ويجعل من يشاء عقيما إنه عليم قدير.
Allah is the supreme sovereign in the heavens and the earth, and the whole system of the universe functions under his laws only, so much so that even the physical life of man is not excluded from its ambit. The astonishing order of creation, including creation of man, is controlled by his laws. According to this law he bestows some with girls, while others with boys, and yet some with both boys and girls, and some remain childless. All this takes place according to his laws. He is replete with knowledge and full of power to control the destinies according to his measures and standards. Thus, whereas the creation of sex is controlled by the divine laws, to consider a girl inferior to a boy was a mentality peculiar to the Arabs of pre-Islamic days. Islam eradicated this. The Quran criticizes it as follows, 16:58-59.
وإذا بشر أحدهم بالأنثى ظل وجهه مسودا وهو كظيم يتوارى من القوم من سوء ما بشر به أيمسكه على هون أم يدسه في التراب ألا ساء ما يحكمون.
When news is brought to one of them of the birth of a female child, his face darkens, and he is filled with grief. He thinks the birth of a female child so disgraceful that he hides himself from his people because of the bad news he received. He begins to think whether he should suffer this contempt or bury the newborn alive in the dust. What an evil choice they decide on their innocent girls. See, wives and children have been made means of elegance in life by Allah, thus they are worthy of the parents' kind attention. 3:13.
زين للناس حب الشهوات من النساء والبنين.
Love for women and children has been made fair seeming for people. Yet one must not commit any act for their sake, which goes against the divine laws and the permanent values ordained by Allah. See 63:4, 8:28, 64:14-15. If one does that, it becomes a sedition for him. Thus, whenever there is a tie between a particular benefit for the wife and children on the one hand, and a Quranic value on the other, the Quranic values shall be given preference. It is said in Surah At-Tawbah, 9th chapter of the Quran, 9:24.
قل إن كان آباؤكم وأبناؤكم وإخوانكم وأزواجكم وعشيرتكم وأموال اقترفتموها وتجارة تخشون كسادها ومساكن ترضونها أحب إليكم من الله ورسوله وجهاد في سبيله فتربصوا حتى يأتي الله بأمره والله لا يهدي القوم الفاسقين.
O Rasul, say unto these people that if it be that your fathers, your sons, your brothers, your spouses, or your kindred, or the wealth which you have gained, the commerce in which you fear a slump, or the dwellings in which you delight, are dearer to you than Allah and His Rasul, that is dearer than the establishment and maintenance of the divine system, wait until the results of such a behavior become manifest unto you according to the divine law. Remember, Allah guides not those who, leaving aside the right path, go astray. It is so, because offsprings relate only to the physical life of man, they have no value against the divine law. 58:17.
لن تغني عنهم أموالهم ولا أولادهم من الله شيئا.
An unrighteous offspring is not even considered a member of one's family by the Quran. This has been explained in the story of Noah in 11:45-46. As long as the children are under the care and upbringing of their parents, they should act under the parents' guidance, but when they are capable of deciding their own affairs, they should begin to act as such. The maxim.
وبالوالدين إحسانا.
To obey the parent is a duty that has not been ordained by the Quran. The Quran has repeatedly asked only to do good to the parents, 436. The Quran states, 3668.
ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق.
If we grant long life to any, we reduce him to an abject state in creation. Man begins to forget what already was in his knowledge. 1670, as such his condition becomes pitiable. Therefore, he shall be treated gently and not rebuked. Thus, it is said in Surah Bani Israel, 17th chapter of the Quran, 17:23-24.
وقضى ربك لا تعبدوا إلا إياه وبالوالدين إحسانا إما يبلغن عندك الكبر أحدهما أو كلاهما فلا تقل لهما أف ولا تنهرهما وقل لهما قولا كريما واخفض لهما جناح الذل من الرحمة وقل رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا.
Thy Rabb has decreed that you should be subservient to none but Allah, be subservient only to the divine law. Further, it is ordained that you be kind to parents, whether one or both of them attain old age in your life. Say not to them a word of contempt, nor repel them, but address them in terms of honor. When they were youthful and active, they provided you with sustenance, in addition to their own. Now they have become old and are not capable of earning. It is your duty to make good their deficiency. Give them protection with all the affection, as they did when you were young, and say, my Rabb, enable me to provide them with means of nourishment as they had cherished me in my childhood. To look after the young is even practiced by the lower animals, but the practice of looking after the parents in old age is peculiar only to a human being. That is why he has been instructed as such. But if the parents are following a wrong path, it must be brought to their notice. This has been made clear in the story of Abraham, 1941-45. It is essential for an Islamic government neither to leave the small children at uncared for the mercy of their parents, nor to leave the aged parents uncared for and dependent on their offsprings to the extent that they become the object of scorn and degradation. For this an Islamic state ought to provide proper guidance and make the necessary arrangements. 20. Orphans. The basic meaning of the word yatim, orphan, is the one who somehow or other is left alone and helpless in society, he may be of any age. But in the context of the subject under discussion, yatim shall mean the children whose father, or both parents, have died. The provision of sustenance, education and upbringing of such children is the responsibility of an Islamic state. But the question is not of upbringing alone. The real problem is that they should be brought up in such a manner that the dignity of their self does not get injured. To keep such children in orphanages, fed on charity, is the destruction of their human self. This leads to the downfall of nations. In Surah Al-Far, 89th chapter of the Quran, it is said that one of the reasons for the destruction of nations is that they do not treat orphans with honor, 89:17.
كلا بل لا تكرمون اليتيم.
Thus the real question is the cultivation of their self-respect. They should not be brought under undue pressure, 93:9.
فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر.
A satisfactory arrangement for their proper nurturing is essential. They should be treated as your own brethren, 220.
ويسألونك عن اليتامى قل إصلاح لهم خير وإن تخالطوهم فإخوانكم والله يعلم المفسد من المصلح ولو شاء الله لأعنتكم إن الله عزيز حكيم.
They ask thee about orphans. Say settling their problems is a deed that produces good. Hence you live together, and if during the period of mutual living you have but to conduct their affairs with your own, always keep in mind that they are your brethren. Allah knows which of you means their good and which of you creates mischief. You are being given such instructions because without it you could have fallen into difficulties, but Allah wants to make things easy for you. This provision of facilities does not mean that you go on doing what you like without any hindrance. Allah's law of requital is exalted in power, yet it is based on wisdom. Their wealth and property, if there be any, must be protected with utmost care. The one managing their affairs, if he is wealthy enough, should not take any remuneration, but if he is needy, he can take a compensation for it. When they reach the age of maturity and they become capable of handling their own affairs, their wealth and property should be handed over to them in the presence of witnesses, for 5 to 6.
ولا تؤتوا السفهاء أموالكم التي جعل الله لكم قياما وارزقوهم فيها واكسوهم وقولوا لهم قولا معروفا وابتلوا اليتامى حتى إذا بلغوا النكاح فإن آنستم منهم رشدا فادفعوا إليهم أموالهم ولا تأكلوها إسرافا وبدارا أن يكبروا ومن كان غنيا فليستعفف ومن كان فقيرا فليأكل بالمعروف فإذا دفعتم إليهم أموالهم فأشهدوا عليهم وكفى بالله حسيبا.
Remember, Allah has made wealth the mainstay of a nation's economy, therefore place it not in the custody of those who are weak of understanding, feed them and clothe them therewith and speak to them words of kindness and justice. Also make arrangements for the upbringing of orphans, and keep checking as to how far their potentialities are developed, until they reach the marriageable age. 6 153, 1734, 4067. If then you find them of sound judgment, deliver their property over to them. But if they are not fit for it yet, act according to 4-5. But in the meantime do not consume their property wastefully, nor in a haste, fearing that they shall demand it when they become grown up. If the guardian is well off, let him claim no remuneration, but if he is poor, let him have what is just and reasonable. When you release their fortune to them, take witnesses. While counting, keep it in mind that you are submitting the account to Allah who knows what is hidden as well as manifest, therefore, He is the best of all those who take account. This point has been emphasized further in 6 153 and 1737. Do not take a single pence from their wealth unlawfully. It has been ordained in Surah An-Nisa, 4th chapter of the Quran, 4:2.
وآتوا اليتامى أموالهم ولا تتبدلوا الخبيث بالطيب ولا تأكلوا أموالهم إلى أموالكم إنه كان حوبا كبيرا.
According to this law no difference remains between your own children and the orphans, therefore, take care of their rights and benefits like those of your own offsprings. Keep their property safe with utmost care, do not exchange your worthless things for their good ones, do not eat up their assets, keep their assets separate from yours, embezzlement in their substance, by mixing it up with your own, is most unjust. One who is left alone in the society, he ought to be helped rather than his rights usurped. It is said further, 4:10.
إن الذين يأكلون أموال اليتامى ظلما إنما يأكلون في بطونهم نارا وسيصلون سعيرا.
Those who unjustly eat up the property of the orphans, they are filling their bellies with fire which leaves their passions of greed ablaze. They being always dissatisfied, run after unlawful wealth like a lunatic and thus put their own potentialities into a blazing fire. If widows and orphans are left behind in society, marrying more than one wife may be allowed by making exception to the law of monogamy, in order to give them a respectable place in society. Details were given earlier. For an Islamic state it is essential to frame necessary laws under the guidance of the Quran. According to the Arabic dialect, a boy is called yatim, orphan, till he reaches the age of maturity, and a girl continues to be called an orphan till she gets married. Even widows can be included in the category of orphans. 127. Removal of a misconception. The injunctions and guidance for family life as stipulated in the Quran have been stated, but the conventional meaning of a verse in Surah Nisa, 4th chapter of the Quran, remains yet to be corrected. The verse is as follows, for 34, it is usually translated thus.
الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم فالصالحات قانتات حافظات للغيب بما حفظ الله والتي تخافون نشوزهن فعظوهن واهجروهن في المضاجع واضربوهن فإن أطعنكم فلا تبغوا عليهن سبيلا إن الله كان عليا كبيرا.
Men are the masters of women because Allah has given superiority to one over the other, for the reason that they spend their money. Then those women who are pious and thus obedient, look after what Allah has protected in them in the absence of their husbands, with the protection of Allah, but those who are feared to be of bad temper, you advise them, keep their beds separate and beat them. After this if they obey you, do not seek a way to accuse them. Allah is indeed the greatest. Translation by Late Maulana Mahmud al-Hassan. By virtue of this translation the following is deduced. Men are the masters of women. Pious women are those who are obedient to their husbands. If a woman is not obedient to her husband, the husband shall advise her, and if she is still disobedient, 2. Keep her separate from his bedroom, which means discontinuation of conjugal relations, and if she is still disobedient, 3. Beat her. It is obvious that this sort of relationship between a husband and his wife goes against the very grain and purpose of the teachings of the Quran, which have been explained in the previous pages. As a matter of fact, the purport of this verse is as follows. As far as the natural duties of men and women are concerned, some of their capabilities are different from each other. In some of them men have the superiority, and in others, the women. As a result of the execution of these duties, for a major portion of her time a woman becomes incapable of earning her livelihood, and thus it becomes the duty of her husband to provide her means of the necessary sustenance. This is what is meant by the words. After such arrangement, the women can give full time, satisfactorily, to their own duties, such as bearing the children and their upbringing, so the women are required to take care of their latent potentialities. But if an occasion arises that in spite of all this a woman revolts and refuses to carry out her specific functions without any sufficient cause, it shall not remain a personal affair. It shall become a collective national issue, because it concerns the protection and augmentation of the human race. Thus society should first admonish such a woman. But if this procedure remains ineffective, her husband should be asked to terminate copulation with her for a while so that its psychological effect may bring about a change in her attitude. But if that also remains ineffective, a court can order even physical punishment for her. You must have noticed that this matter concerns the collective life of a nation, and it is of great importance. In this respect, if women refuse to cooperate and thus rise against the collective benefit of humanity, it becomes imperative for society to take adequate steps to put a check on this revolt. It is a social crime for which even punishment can be given. But that does not mean that men are free to beat the women on account of being their masters. This concept is utterly un-Quranic.